Hello, and welcome to the Shanachie Hour. I'm Kathleen, your Shanachie. What's a Shanachie, you ask? Well, a Shanachie is a storyteller, and I will be telling you stories from this book, Best Loved Irish Legends. What's a legend, you ask? Well, a legend is a story that is very, very, very old, older than your parents, your grandparents, your grandparents' grandparents, and back and back and back, very old. And it's a story that may or may not be true. You have to decide that. For instance, you see that rainbow behind me? That's an Irish rainbow, by the way. And you know what they say about Irish rainbows? There's a pot of gold at the end of them. Is that true? Well, I've never actually been able to find the end of a rainbow in Ireland or anywhere else, so I can't be sure. What do you think? Now, why am I telling you Irish legends? Because Irish legends come from the country of Ireland, which is very far away. It's across the Atlantic Ocean from Canada. And Ireland is the home of St. Patrick, and we will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day very soon. Now, why was St. Patrick such a big deal in Ireland? Well, he came there and taught people about God. And they also say that he drove all of the snakes out of Ireland. That's a legend. Is it true? I don't know. But I can tell you this. To this day, there are no snakes in Ireland. Now, St. Patrick wasn't born in Ireland. He actually was kidnapped by pirates and sold into slavery in Ireland. Is that a legend? No, that's actually true. And when he got older, he became the Bishop of Ireland. All right, I think it's time to start telling the story.
Our first legend is the Salmon of Knowledge. Now, a salmon is a fish, and a very tasty one at that. Long ago, there lived a boy called Fionn, who wanted to know everything. His mother got tired of answering his questions, so she sent him to live with two wise women. They taught Fionn many things. Then, one day, they too got tired of answering his questions. They sent him to live with the wisest man in Ireland, who was called Finnegas. But even he did not know everything, and even he got tired of being asked questions by Fionn. "How can I know everything?" asked Fionn. "Everything in the whole world." "I'm not going to tell you that," said Finnegas. Finnegas had a secret. Fionn did all the jobs around the house for Finnegas. He didn't like the cooking and cleaning, but he loved the hunting and fishing. Finnegas often sent him to fish in a pool in the River Boyne. Fionn liked it there because he could sit in the shade of a huge old hazel tree. He would watch the hazelnuts fall into the water and drift away. Sometimes a silver salmon came up from the depths of the pool and swallowed the nuts. Then, one day, Fionn caught the salmon. When Finnegas saw the fish, he became very excited. "Cook it at once," he said, "and don't eat a single bite of it. This fish is all for me." Fionn thought that was a bit unfair. The salmon was huge, and he was the one who had caught it. But Finnegas was his master, so he would do as he was told. He lit a fire and cooked the salmon. Even though it smelt delicious, he did not taste any of it. But as he was taking it off the fire, he burnt his thumb on the salmon's hot, bubbling skin. He stuck his thumb in his mouth and sucked it to stop the pain. Then he took the fish to Finnegas. "You didn't eat any of the salmon, did you?" Finnegas asked suspiciously, his voice squeaking with worry. "I did not," said Fionn. You didn't even taste its skin, did you? Said Finnegas. Fionn started to say, I did not again. Then he remembered. I just put my finger in my mouth when I burnt it on the skin, he said, but I didn't eat any. Finnegan was furious. Now you have it! You have the knowledge! He roared. What? Said Fionn. What are you saying? That fish is the salmon of knowledge, said Finnegas. It has eaten the nuts from the ancient hazel tree that holds all the knowledge in the world. And the first person to taste that salmon gains all the wisdom there is. Fionn was amazed. You can have the rest of it, he said guiltily. It's no use now, said Finnegas. It's only a stupid ordinary fish. Now all its knowledge is inside you. I don't think so, said Finn. I don't feel very different. Which finger did you burn? Asked Finnegas. My thumb, said Finn, holding up his thumb. Put it in your mouth, ordered Finnegas. Fionn looked at his thumb. Then, slowly, he placed it in his mouth. As soon as he did so, he felt all the knowledge of the world rush into his head. He had only to think of a question, any question, to know the answer immediately. Poor Finnegas. They ate the rest of the fish together anyway. But Finnegas could not eat very much. He knew now he would never have the wisdom he had waited for all his life. Instead, the knowledge had gone to a little boy. When Fionn grew up, he became a great warrior and hunter, and a wise leader of the Fianna, the greatest band of warriors Ireland has ever known. And whenever he needed to know something, anything, all he had to do was put his thumb in his mouth and bite hard on it. He never had to ask anyone any questions, ever again. I wonder if that would work.
This next story is called The King with the Donkey's Ears. There once was a young boy called Donald who wanted to be a barber. His mother wasn't happy about it. Donald was her only son, and she wanted him to be a famous hero. But Donald didn't want to be a hero. He wanted to cut people's hair and make them look good. Now, the king of the country, Lowry Leanshack, had a secret. It was a very big secret. He had donkey's ears. He wore them flattened down under his crown so no one could see them. Whenever he got his hair cut, he had the barber executed immediately afterwards, so his secret would not get out. Everyone wondered what the big secret was. One day, Donald was called to the palace to cut the king's hair. His mother threw a terrible fit and refused to let him go. Instead, she herself went to the palace gates and wept and roared and screamed and bawled. All the courtiers had to go around with their fingers in their ears so they wouldn't hear the awful noise. The king couldn't put his fingers in his ears because of his secret. He said, "What is that woman yowling about?" The chief minister took his fingers out of his ears and said, "What?" The king repeated the question. "It's her son, the barber," said the chief minister. "She doesn't want him put to death. She says she won't stop until he is spared. And if he is killed, she says, she'll carry on forever." That was an awful threat. Lowry was already so tired of listening to the commotion that he said, "Very well, I will let her son live, but he must swear that he will tell nobody what he sees when he cuts my hair, not a word to anything with ears or a mouth." And Donald promised. He cut the king's hair. He saw the king's secret. Afterwards, Donald found he could think of nothing but the king's ears. Every time he saw a donkey, he started guiltily. Every night, he dreamed about ears. He became pale and sick. His mother said, "What's wrong with you now, son?" "It's the king's secret," said Donald. "I'm the only one in the whole world who knows it. Not telling anyone is driving me mad." "You could tell me," his mother suggested. Donald knew that if he told his mother the secret, it would be all over the kingdom in about an hour. He shook his head. "I've sworn not to tell anyone or anything with a mouth or ears." His mother sniffed. "If that's the case," she said, "tell something that doesn't have a mouth or ears. Tell a plant or a tree." So Donald went straight down to the riverbank and whispered the king's secret to a big willow tree there. Afterwards, he felt much better. But that is not the end of the story. The willow was a lovely tree. One day, a harper passed by and saw how good the wood was. He needed a new harp, so he cut a branch from the tree and made one. Then he continued on his way, and, as chance would have it, he was called to play for the court of King Lowry. As soon as he struck his harp, it began to sing, all by itself. "Lowry Shark has donkey's ears, Lowry Shark has donkey's ears, Lowry Shark has donkey's ears." And while the court stared at the king in amazement, the singing went on and on and on. Lowry was furious. He leapt from his throne. His crown fell off, and his ears, long and pointed and covered in soft fur, could be plainly seen. Everyone could see them. Lowry Leanshark discovered two things. The first thing he learned was that it is impossible to keep a secret in Ireland. The second thing he learned was that having donkey's ears was not really such a big deal. Life was easier now that everyone knew his secret. He no longer had to worry all the time about being found out. As for Donald, he had saved all the barbers of the kingdom from certain death. He was a hero. His mother was delighted, and he was made royal hairdresser and was allowed to give the king a much nicer haircut. So he was delighted too.
The next story is Fionn and the Giant. Now this picture behind me is called the Giant's Causeway. A causeway is a bridge not made by humans that goes across water so you can get from one side to the other. And what you're looking at is what's left of the Giant's Causeway. It looks like stepping stones, doesn't it? And the legend goes that this causeway was how the Scottish giant came over to Ireland to fight Fionn. So this is what it looked like. Is it true? You decide. Bang, bang, bang! The door of Fionn's house rattled and shook and then fell down. Standing in the doorway was a big, fat, hairy giant. He had red whiskers and a red nose. He was wearing red plaid trousers. Fionn's wife was at home. She was cross with the giant. She had liked her front door, and now it was gone. But the giant was 5 times bigger than she was. So she said, "Would you like to come in?" The giant roared, "I'm here to fight Fionn. I have made a pathway all the way across the sea from Scotland to come and fight him." "Is that right?" said Fionn's wife. "Sorry, but he's out hunting. Would you like a cup of tea while you're waiting for him?" The giant was so surprised that he forgot to roar. He had fought lots of people. Nobody had ever given him tea. He said, Yes. Do you have cake? I might have, said Fion's wife. Sit down there by the fire now. The giant sat on the cat and made it yowl. He did not say sorry. Fion's wife made tea. She took out her nicest cake and she gave it to the giant. The giant did not say thank you. He put the whole cake in his mouth. He dribbled crumbs everywhere. When he had finished the tea and the cake, he gave a big belch. Lovely, said Fion's wife. Then she warned, be careful. You might wake the baby. What baby? Said the giant. Fion's wife showed him a crib. There was someone asleep in it. That's the baby? Asked the giant. It is, said Fion's wife. But it must be 2 meters tall, said the giant. 2.5 meters, said Fion's wife proudly. He has hair all over his face, said the giant. Yes, I have to shave him every day, said Fion's wife. He looks like he could kill a boar, said the giant. 2 this month already, said Fion's wife, smiling, with his bare hands. How old is he? Asked the giant. He's a month old, said Fion's wife, and she looked fondly at him. The baby opened its eyes and smiled. Holy moly, said the giant. He has an awful set of teeth in his head. He has, hasn't he? Said Fion's wife. The giant was starting to look scared. If Fion's baby is this big, he thought, Fion must be huge. He began to wonder if fighting Fionn was a good idea. The baby started to cry. The crying got louder and louder. It shook the windows of the cottage. It shook the walls of the cottage. It would have shaken the door of the cottage, but there was no door to shake. The giant had knocked it down. The giant put his fingers in his ears. Fionn's wife went to a pot on the stove. She took out a huge bone. Give that to the baby, will you? She said. The giant tried to put the bone in the baby's mouth. The baby bit the giant's finger so hard that the giant started to roar. Oh, isn't he a little pet? Said Fionn's wife. I just remembered something, said the giant. I have to be home for my dinner. It's haggis tonight. He ran out the door. He ran all the way back to Scotland to stop Fionn following him. He ripped up the path of stones as he went. The bit that is left is called the Giant's Causeway. When he got to his house, the giant banged on the door so hard it fell down. His wife was cross with him. Fionn's wife wasn't cross anymore. You can get out of bed now, she said. He's gone. Our trick worked. The big, hairy baby in the bed smiled. It was Fionn. This next story is The White Wolfhound. Did you know that Irish wolfhounds are the largest dog breed? They're really, really tall, and they're great hunters. Fionn, we just met him in a recent story, had a sister called Tureen, who was so kind that everyone loved her. Everyone, that is, except a witch called Uchtdelv, who was jealous of Turin's kindness and loveliness and long, fair hair. So one day, Uchtdelv went to Turin's palace, and waving her magic hazel wand, she turned the princess into an Irish wolfhound. But because Turin had been fair-haired and beautiful, the hound was beautiful too, and its coat was as white as snow. Uchtdelv took Turin by the scruff of her neck and dragged her to the house of a very grumpy man called Fergus. Fergus really hated dogs. When he saw Uchtdelv and the big white wolfhound coming towards his house, he ran outside and barred the door. That dog can't come in here, he said to Uchtdelv. She's smelly and dirty, and she'll drop hairs everywhere. Turin looked at him sadly and tried to lick his hand. He pushed her away. "Get off me, you big hairy dribbler," he said. "But Fionn wants you to take this dog in," said Uchdelv. She was sure that Turin would have a terrible life in Fergus's care. Now everyone did as Fionn asked, so with a sigh, Fergus took the dog into his house. Uchdelv smiled as she watched Turin follow him inside with her tail tucked between her legs and her ears down. But although the witch had been able to change Turin's shape, she could not change her nature. Every time Turin saw Fergus, she would try to lick him. She tripped him up with balls, begging him to play. She pined when he wasn't there. She was also the best hunting dog in the country, and the two of them spent many happy days together out in the woods and the mountains and the marshes. So, as time went on, Fergus grew very fond of Turin. "That dog is nearly human," he would tell his friends, not realizing that that was exactly what she was. He called her Princess, not realizing that that was what she really was too. He was delighted when she had two little puppies, which he called Bran and Skjolin. They would roll around on the floor in front of the fire, and Fergus would find himself laughing at them. He sometimes thought Turin looked as if she were laughing too. Fergus's life was much happier because of Turin. He was no longer grumpy. But Fionn missed his sister and was afraid that something bad had happened to her. He used his magic thumb to discover that she was in Fergus's house. He traveled there, and as soon as he saw the big white dog, he knew that it was Turin. She ran to Fionn and put her paws on his shoulders, licking him all over his face. Fergus explained how he had got the dog. They quickly realized that Uchdelv had put a spell on Turin. Together they went to the witch's house and forced her to turn Turin back into a woman. Fergus was very sad to lose his faithful friend, but Fionn got him a new puppy for company. Bran and Skjolin became Finn's faithful hunting dogs and stayed with him always. As for Turin, she was very happy to be back with her family and friends in the palace, but because of her time as a dog, she had changed. She sometimes got overexcited when someone mentioned going for a walk. At dinner, there were times when she really wanted to pick up the bones from her plate and chew them by the fire. She missed running after rabbits. She missed rolling on her back in the long grass. She missed being able to scratch behind her ear with one foot. She missed being able to lick people she liked. And there were summer evenings when Fionn would come upon her, sitting on the grass outside the palace, gazing into the sinking sun and sniffing the wind, as if waiting for someone to call her home. Let's take a little break from stories and play a game together. And you have to try to find the differences. This is from a great little website called akidsheart.com. Maybe you can check it out with your parents at another time and find some more fun things to do. All right, let's start at the top here with these two stamps. I can't hear you telling me what the differences are that you spot. Just keep looking back and forth. And I'm sure by now you figured it out. It's the number. Now, let's look at the leprechaun. What's different between this one and this one? One thing is the number. But there's something else that's different. Do you see it? It's the buckle on his hat. It's on a different side. Let's look at this stamp. This is a little trickier. What do you see? The number's not different. What is different? You might notice that the shamrock is facing a different way. And let's take a look at the words good luck. different color? Okay, let's go down to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. What's different between these two? Well, for one thing, there's an extra piece of gold over here. And let's look at this stamp. What's different here? The number's the same. What is it? Let's look at the shamrock. See that dark part there on that leaf? That's different. We've got one more to find, and it's in this stamp somewhere. What's different? Once again, there's an extra piece of gold here. All right, found them all. Check it out, akidsheart.com. There's lots more fun games to play. This next story is called Oisin. Oisin was Fionn's son, one of the bravest of the warriors of the Fianna. He was a poet, too, and he loved to sit looking at the sea or the mountains, dreaming of faraway things. One day, as he was sitting by Loch Lane, near Killarney, he saw a beautiful girl with long golden hair and eyes the color of emeralds, coming towards him on a white horse. She was smiling. "I am Niamh," she said when she reached him. "I am the princess of Tir-na-nog, the land of the ever-young, where there is no sickness or age or death. I have fallen in love with you, Oisin. Come home with me, and I will make you the happiest man alive. Climb up onto Moon Shadow, and I will take you to Tir-na-nog." So he did. They rode Moon Shadow over the hills and under the waves until they came to Niamh's kingdom. Oisin was happy in Tir-na-nog. Niamh was as kind as she was lovely, and Tir-na-nog was a beautiful land. It was always summer there, and no one was ever sad. But after a while, Oisin began to miss his family and his friends. He missed Ireland itself, the hills and the lakes and the rivers of home. Niamh saw that he was unhappy and asked him what was wrong. "Let me go home," said Oisin, "just for a visit, just to see everyone and say goodbye properly. Come with me. I want you to meet my people." Niamh shook her head. She said, "I cannot go, and I wish you would not go either. But I can see your heart is set on it. I will lend you Moon Shadow, and he will bring you safely back to me. But there is one thing you must remember. You must not put your foot on Irish ground. Will you promise me that?" Oisin promised and kissed his beloved Niamh goodbye. She watched him go, her emerald eyes full of tears. Moon Shadow carried Oisin over hills and under waves until they reached Loch Lane. Oisin was back home. But how different it was. The great palaces were gone, and even the people looked different. They were smaller and scrawnier and did not seem very happy. Oisin asked some men who were trying to lift a big stone where he might find Fionn and the rest of the Fianna. The men looked puzzled. Then an old white-haired man standing nearby said, "Oh, I have heard of the Fianna, men like giants, but they have all been dead for hundreds of years." Oisin gasped. What had seemed only 3 years in Tir-na-nog was 300 in Ireland. All his friends and family were gone. He would never see them again. Then one of the men said, "You are a fine tall fellow, like the heroes of old. Can you help us lift this rock?" Oisin leaned down from the back of Moon Shadow and pushed the rock. The rock shifted and fell, but so did Oisin. And as soon as he touched the ground of Ireland, he became a very old man. Moonshadow reared up and galloped away. Oisin watched as he disappeared over the horizon. He knew then that he would never be able to return to Tir na Nog. Oisin was very sad, and he knew that Niamh would be sad too. But something good came out of it. Oisin became a famous storyteller, traveling all over Ireland, telling his tales. It is only because of his stories that we have not forgotten Fionn and the Fianna, and the heroes and heroines who lived in Ireland long, long ago. Now this next story is a little bit sad, just so you know, but it's beautiful. The Children of Lir. Fionnuala was a princess. She had 3 brothers, I, Fiachra, and Con. Fiachra and Con were twins and as wild as hares. The only time they were still was at the end of the day when their mother sang them to sleep. But the queen died, and everyone was very sad for a long time. Then King Lear married again. Aoife, his new wife, was very beautiful. But what no one knew was that she was a witch. She was jealous of Lear's love for his children and came to hate them. She especially hated it when Fionnuala sang her mother's songs to Con and Fiachra, because she herself had a voice like a crow. One day she said to Fionnuala, "Get your brothers, we are going to visit your grandfather." They all got into Aoife's chariot. They had not gone far when they stopped at a lake. It was a beautiful sunny day. "You can all go swimming, my chickens," said Aoife. Fionnuala was worried. Why was Aoife being nice? She was never nice. "Stop," she called to her brothers. "Don't go into the water." But it was too late. I was already swimming to the middle of the lake. Con and Fiachra were splashing each other wildly. Fionnuala went to the water's edge and called to her brothers again. But Aoife waved her wand and cast a spell over the children. Fionnuala began to feel very strange. She could see feathers sprouting all over her arms and legs. Her toes became webbed like a duck's. She looked at her brothers. The same thing was happening to them. The 4 children had disappeared. Instead, there were 4 swans in the water. Aoife stood on the bank of the lake laughing. "Now you can sing all you like." Then she chanted her spell. "You will be swans for 900 years. The first 300 years you will spend here. The next 300 years you will spend on the North Sea. And the next 300 years you will spend on the Western Ocean. Only the sound of a bell will save you, and you will become human again." Con and Fiachra started to cry. Fionnuala wanted to cry too, but she said, "We will fly to our father and tell him what has happened." They told King Lear what Aoife had done, and Lear was very angry. He could do magic too, and he changed Aoife into a hideous black crow. She flew away from the palace, cawing angrily. But Lear could not break the spell on his children. So every day he went to the lake where he sat and listened to them singing. And when he died, they still came to that spot to sing together and remember their father. At the end of 300 years, the 4 swans had to leave. They flew to the North Sea, where the sea was wild and the waves so high they washed over the swan children when they tried to rest. The wind was icy. Sometimes their feet froze to the rocks. They huddled together, and Fionnuala held her brothers under her wings to try to keep them warm. At last, 300 years were over. The swans flew over Ireland to the Western Ocean. In the Western Ocean, There were little islands where the swan children could rest on soft grass instead of hard rocks. Inishglora was their favorite island. They would watch the sun set over the sea and sing quietly together. People in the ships passing by heard them and thought they were listening to mermaids. One day, when they were out fishing, Fiacre, Con, and I came to Finola. Con said, "Something strange is happening on Inishglora." The 4 swans flew towards the island. There they saw a holy man, and he was building a tiny hut of stones. He sang as he worked. When he had finished, he tied something shiny to the top of the hut. It was a bell. The wind blew, and the bell began to ring. The children had never heard anything so lovely. The holy man looked up at the 4 beautiful swans flying round and round above him. "Come down, my friends," he said. "I have heard you singing. Come down and sing with me." But as soon as the 4 children landed on the island, something strange happened. Their feathers fell from them. The webs fell from their toes. Finola looked at her brothers. She saw 3 very old men. She herself was a very old woman. The holy man looked sadly at them. He knew now from the old stories that they were the children of Lear and that they were going to die. But Finola smiled and said, "Don't be sad. We are very tired. We have lived very long lives, too long. We'll be happy to sleep here on your island." Then they lay down on the soft green grass beside the little hut, and all the birds of the island came to sing them to sleep. This is a story about a leprechaun, one of the wee people. Wee just means little. It's called Micheline Emmett O'Shea. I met a wee leprechaun one summer's day. He called himself Micheline Emmett O'Shea. With his jacket of crimson and buttons of gold, he was a fine vision for me to behold. On shoes he was working as I wandered by, and dropping his hammer, he gave a great cry. "Be japers," says he, "you gave me a scare. Tell me, how long have you been standing there?" "Not long," said I, hardly believing my eyes. "You're a leprechaun. Sure, what a lovely surprise." "I've been out for a walk by this old castle ruin. Now, do you mind telling me, what's that you're doing?" "Begorra," said he, "I'll tell you all right. These shoes I've been working on for a fortnight, and if they're not finished by Saturday morn, I'll have to put up with Her Majesty's scorn. For it's the Queen of the Fairies to whom they belong. So be on your way, little girl, get along." Said I, "That'll do, once you give me your gold. For now that I've seen you, you must, so I'm told. Now, where are you hiding your treasure, do tell? Is it up in a tree? Is it down in a well?" "All right then," said he. "'Tis way across the bog, right next to the stream, where there lives an old frog. And if you dig deep, you'll find it all right. But you'd better start now, girl, for soon 'twill be night. Ah, you'll never regret meeting me here today, or my name isn't Micheline Emmett O'Shea." Then I lifted him up, he was light as a feather, and journeyed we 2 down the long road together. And when we arrived at the place where it was hid, I knelt on the ground, and here's what I did. I started to dig with a stick that I found, while Mr. O'Shea sat himself on the ground. But then his first trick he decided to pull. "Look out!" shouted he. "'Tis a wild charging bull!" But his prank didn't work, for my eyes wouldn't stray. No, you'll not get the better of me here today, for I had recalled what my dad had once said one night as he nestled me into my bed. "If a leprechaun you should encounter by chance, don't look away from him, hold firm your glance. And if you should manage to not wince or cower, 'Tis then that you'll have him firm in your power." Then Micheline said, "Look, your house is on fire." Said I, "You'll not trick me, you crafty old liar." With my stomach now empty, my arms growing tired, I struggled to search for the gold I desired. Then something jumped straight up from out of the bog. I turned and looked up and saw 'twas a frog. And when I looked back, Micheline, he was gone, but the sound of his wee little laugh lingered on. Then I heard him cry out, "That was no frog at all, but my friend Padraian who came to my call. Yet you'll still ne'er regret meeting me here today, or my name isn't Micheline Emmett O'Shea." Then away down the road the pair of them went, and with tears in my eyes, near a half hour I spent. As I wiped my eyes dry, feeling sad as could be, I saw a girl standing there, smiling at me. "Hello there," said she. "I'm a new girl in town, and I can't help but notice you look very down. My name is Sinead Fionnuala O'Brien. If you don't mind me asking you, why are you crying?" "Oh, you'll never believe what just happened back there. A leprechaun tricked me and ran off, I swear." Then softly said she, "Come to my house for tea. A nice chat will make you feel better. You'll see." Said I, "You're so kind. My name is Katie Malone, and I'd give anything for some tea and a scone." And from that day forward, our friendship grew. And now, looking back, I can tell you 'tis true, that whether you're young or whether you're old, a good friend is always much better than gold. And I often recall what that leprechaun said as I drift off to sleep in my warm feather bed. "You'll never regret meeting me here today, or my name isn't Micheline Emmett O'Shea." This story is called Micheline and the Stone Soup. Micheline was a traveling man. He spent his life traveling around Ireland, visiting people in their homes. In every house, he told them the news he had picked up on his travels. There were no newspapers or televisions or internet in those days, and people were always keen to hear the news from Micheline. Micheline would recite poems, some of which he made up himself. Then he would play a few tunes on his tin whistle. This made people very happy, and they would always give him a good meal. If it was getting dark, they would ask him to stay the night. They always gave him some money. One day, Micheline called at the home of Owen and his new wife, Nora. They had a nice house and a fine farm with cows, hens, ducks, and lots of geese. They never kept pigs. A pig had caused a lot of trouble to Owen when he was a single man, and he never bothered with them after that. Owen and Nora were starting to sit down to eat their dinner, and they immediately asked Micheline to join them. Micheline told them all the news, recited a poem, and sang a few songs. He also played some lovely tunes on his tin whistle. Owen gave him a shilling. "I'll call to the McCarthys next," said Micheline before he left. "But the McCarthys have sold their farm and gone to America," said Nora. "Another couple called the Meanies are living there now." "You'd be wasting your time calling on them," said Owen. "They are a miserable pair. When the people around here were helping old widow Kelly to cut her grass, the Meanies were the only ones who wouldn't help. Last week, one of my geese wandered into the Meanies' fields, and when I went to look for it, Mrs. Meanie told me she saw the goose flying away over the hills. When I called the next day, I knew from the smell that they had eaten the goose for dinner." "They are both greedy and stupid," said Micheline. "I will do 3 things to them. First, I'll get them to feed me. Then I'll get them to give me 5 shillings, and later I'll tell people. See how silly they are." Then Micheline waved goodbye to Owen and Nora and headed for the Meanies' house. On the way, he picked up a stone from the road and wrapped it up in his handkerchief. When Micheline knocked at the Meanies' house, there was no reply. But Micheline knew they were at home because he could see smoke coming out of their chimney. After knocking many times, the door was opened a little and a woman shouted out, "Go away! We've nothing for you." Micheline said, "I want nothing but a little water. I have a magic soup stone. If I put it in water, it will make the loveliest soup you have ever tasted." The woman then opened the door. Her husband stood beside her. "Show us this magic stone," she said, "and let us see how it works." Micheline stepped inside. He took out the stone from his pocket and told the Meanies to put more wood on the fire. He asked them to put water into a saucepan and heat it. "This is the magic soup stone," he said as he dropped it into the saucepan. "We will have nice soup very soon." While the Meanies watched him, the water began to heat up. Micheline tasted a spoonful of it. "It needs some pepper and salt," he declared. Mrs. Meany gave him some pepper and salt, and he put them into the water. Micheline tasted the water again. "It needs meat," he said. "Have you any beef or mutton?" Mrs. Meany gave Micheline slices of beef and mutton, and he threw them into the saucepan. Micheline tasted the water again. "It needs onions, carrots, and potatoes," he said. When Mrs. Meany gave him these, he added them to the soup. "It's ready now," said Micheline. "Put 3 soup bowls on the table." Micheline poured the soup into the bowls, and the 3 of them sat at the table and began eating it. The Meanies were delighted with the beautiful soup and told Micheline that his magic stone was wonderful. Then Micheline heard Mrs. Meany whisper to her husband, "Buy the magic stone off this beggar man. Then we can have lovely soup every day at no cost." Mr. Meany offered Micheline a shilling for the stone, but the traveling man would not take less than 5 shillings. Mr. Meany finally handed over the money with very poor grace and grabbed the stone greedily. Micheline put the 5 shillings in his pocket and left the Meany's house. For the next few weeks, in all the houses he visited, Micheline told the people about Mr. and Mrs. Meany and how they had paid him 5 shillings for a worthless stone. Everyone thought this was the funniest thing they had ever heard, and they laughed and laughed. This is the story of the rescue of Fairy Queen Maebe. High on an oak tree one morning in June, a fairy queen sat and played a fine tune. As she plucked on her harp strings an old Irish air, her sweet lilting music was heard everywhere. Today was a day that she yearned to be free. Far away from her kingdom she wished she could be. Sometimes, being queen, her patience was tested, but after playing her harp, she always felt rested. Unbeknownst to the queen, hiding right down below, was a creature in black with a face white as snow. The creature was wearing a smile ear to ear, and the thoughts it was thinking were far from sincere. Before the queen knew it, that banshee appeared and spread her black cloak, and they both disappeared. The queen was then taken to cliffs by the sea and kept in a cave with the howling banshee. An hour or 2 passed till a search had begun. The fairies looked everywhere under the sun. They tried to imagine just where she would go. No queen could they find, though they looked high and low. The queen had been put deep into a trance to endlessly play for the banshee's wild dance. She strummed on her harp through that entire morn, while her fingertips, blistered and bleeding, were torn. The banshee joined in with a horrible scream, and the poor fairy wished she could wake from her dream. But she didn't know then that back at the fort, the fairies had all gathered round to hold court. They agreed on a plan. They knew what to do. They'd send for the leprechauns, Owen and Hugh. The duo were famous throughout fairyland, for their trickery deeds were greater than grand. They soon headed out to look for the queen, and first started searching the place where she'd been, which everyone knew was the royal oak tree. They hoped for a clue as to where she might be. As Owen looked round, he scratched on his beard. Then, through the damp leaves, a small hedgehog appeared. He waddled around him and sniffed at his shoe and told him a hawk up the tree had a clue. Owen called out, "Can you please come down here? This hedgehog said you saw the queen disappear." "Yes," said the hawk. "She was with the banshee. They vanished this morning from this very tree. I watched that dark spirit take her off to her cave, and I'm sure if you go there, you'll find your queen, Maebe. So climb on my wings, and I'll take you right now." "We both thank you kindly," said Hugh with a bow. "Be japers," said Hugh, "there's a crow flying by, and I notice a very strange look in its eye. And though I'm not certain of what it could be, I wonder if that bird could be our banshee." Well, his hunch was correct, for the crow turned around and tried to knock Owen and Hugh to the ground. It lunged at the hawk and pecked hard with its beak. "Stay away!" shrieked the crow. "If the queen's who you seek." The banshee flew off as the hawk tried to land. "Well, good luck if she thinks we'll obey her command," said Hugh as he waved goodbye to the hawk, as he circled above them, heading up the cliff walk. Hugh then asked Owen had he thought of a plan. "Are you coddling me? Course I have, silly young man. First we've to find her, and then we'll proceed with Her Majesty's rescue. So stay close, take heed." So the pair kept on looking and listening to hear if the banshee or fairy queen somehow was near. And deep in a cave, the queen kept on strumming, while hoping and praying that someone was coming. "Do you hear that?" said Owen. "It must be the queen. At least she's alive, though she hasn't been seen. How do you suppose we're going to get through with this rock in the way and only us two?" Then Hugh said, "Let's see if there's a small little hole, and we'll squeeze in and rescue her. How's that for a go?" "Oh, you're good, very good," said Owen quite brightly. "Well, come then," said Hugh. "Let's go very quietly." While the waves splashed below them, the pair looked about till Hugh spied a crack. "We'll get through it, no doubt." So with pushing and shoving, the pair did succeed, and they lowered themselves with pure leprechaun speed. The cave was in darkness except for one spot, and there sat the queen in the dampness and rot. When the queen saw the boys, she cried out, "Who are you?" "Pleased to meet you, your majesty. I'm Owen, he's Hugh. We were hired by your subjects when they voted at court to carry you safely back home to your fort. So please, can we leave here as quick as can be before the return of the wicked banshee?" But just then the banshee returned to her cave, and Owen and Hugh did their best to look brave. The banshee howled out, "There'll be no rescue today. Since a spell has been cast, only me she'll obey. And now you'll pay dearly for acting so sly. Since you all have seen me, prepare ye to die." But Owen recalled an old leprechaun spell and lifted his arms and let out a yell. "Dulamach, Dulamach, banshee, Dulamach! As an tíran an ois, Dulamach. What he's saying is, get out of the country, you old banshee. A moment went by, and then Owen could see that they were well rid of the wailing banshee. The spell was now broken, and the queen jumped up free and flew around the cave with her harp joyously. With the spirit now gone from her dark, evil den, the queen then gave thanks to the brave little men. They quickly got out of that dark, dreary cave and returned to the fort of the jubilant Maebe. Now safe and set free, the queen was delighted, and the leprechauns, heroes, well, they became knighted. And all was then well throughout fairyland, for Owen and Hugh did exactly as planned. Now, fairyland's back to its normal routine, and Maeve's more content with her duties as queen, and the fairies still talk of those leprechauns brave and remember the rescue of Fairy Queen Maebe.